Hi, my name is Adam Jones. I'm a digital navigator with the Whitman County Library System, coming to you from the Albion branch, which is an amazing branch. If you haven't visited, do come by, come inside. It is such a neat location. We'll be here till about 3 today, but we wanted to go ahead and present a little bit about digital security, data protection, and password best practices, things that you shouldn't do. Maybe you still are doing, but maybe you shouldn't. But it's okay, we'll talk about it today. So to get started, the main thing that we have to address is the idea of what do we actually consider data? Right, are we considering just pictures and some documents, maybe a couple PDFs? Or are we considering your data to also be your location, your tax information, family information, and then what is sensitive, what is allowed to be public? There's a lot to consider with that. And not only that, we have to look at who can access it at what point. And when we say, okay, who can access it, it's more about controlling that access point. Is it just in one location? Is it on a cloud-connected device? Or is it something that's shared amongst family in a quote-unquote secure area? Once we define data and then identify the use cases and the privacy concerns that are related to it, then we're able to say, this is the protocol that we want to have to make sure that it is secure. And depending on your line of work or environment, you may not be able to keep everything private all the time. For us, we make a lot of videos, and so our faces are out there, our photos are out there, but then my documents, my private things that I keep at home, those are locked away and secure. So then we're controlling access via locations, websites, and then types. And that's something to keep in mind as we go through this. But then we also have to consider what is accessing that data, right? Because it's not just humans that are accessing data. What hardware and software is accessing your data at any point? Even if you have an Xbox that's connected to your Microsoft account, an Xbox is still reading data from your Microsoft account. So it may have access to your photos, to your browsing history, among other pieces of data. So then we have to say, okay, can these services or this device access these accounts? Now, granted, we've all kind of accepted that these things are going to be reading our data, mostly for advertising purposes. And that's really what has made the internet go round, is advertising. That's where a lot of the money is fueled. That's what fuels Google, and to a greater extent, Microsoft in the long run. And there's some really neat things that are there about it. And we're going to talk about that down the road. Real briefly on passwords, there's a lot of different types of passwords to keep all of these things secure. You have your normal passwords, your one-time passwords, if you've ever gotten those from Amazon. They like to use those a lot. Your two-factor authentication, PINs, your thumbprint, your facial recognition, and even security questions. Those are and can be considered a part of the password security. But those are not always foolproof, and they do have to be done in layers of security. And as we look at that with your passwords, please do your best to not just put it on a sticky note and stick it on your laptop. I do know people who do that, and it is very scary. Mostly because I can just pick up the laptop and then walk away with it. And then I have your password and the login. And so therefore, that password that was meant to protect your data, right, because you have it loaded into a local device, there's a password meant to keep it secure, but it's no longer secure if that password is easy access and available. The other thing to keep in mind is maybe it's not on a sticky. Make sure that's not with personally identifiable information. If you have a kid or a dog or a cat, don't use those as part of the password because it's easy to guess. And there are programs that will what we call brute force or try a number of combinations with child's name, 1234, child's name, 12345, etc., and do its best to try and access your account just by guessing the dog's name, the kid's name, etc. Those are really easy to guess, just even on the fly. Even your birth date or an anniversary date or even your social security number, please don't ever do that, can make it really easy to access your data. Just because people can guess it, they can see it, they can interact with it. And please, please, please don't make your password with a 0. That is still something that we see, and it's easy to guess. It'll get hacked in just a few moments from a malicious source. The other thing that we recommend to not do with your passwords is to use something like the Chrome or Edge or Safari autofills on your web browsers. In a scenario where I come pick up the laptop and walk away with it, if I have the sticky note that was maybe underneath the keyboard or in a desk drawer or another location, I can then access the computer, load up the web browser, and then access your bank. Because odds are you also have your bank website in your favorites, and then with an autofill. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, okay, but my bank does a 2-factor authentication. That is true. However, if I also did nab the phone, and if you don't have your security settings as such, I can trigger the 2-factor authentication and have it show up on the screen and access it that way. The other thing that can become an issue is if we pull the SIM card out and put it into a different phone and then send the text message 2-factor authentication, we are then able to get it and supply it and get into that bank. Now, this is all scary and it all sounds really easy. And that's where if you take the steps to protect yourself, don't have the post-it notes, and keep things kind of separate, altogether separate, you're able to keep yourself much more secure through obscurity than just saying, all right, I have it all and it's in one place where someone can just pick it up and walk away. With passwords, we do recommend making them long, which a lot of people say, hey, 12 to 16 characters is a lot, and it is. An easy way around that is to make it a sentence. Like, the Albion library is the best branch. Number 1, like #1, and that's a really long password. And it has numbers, and you can add more special characters, and that's easy to remember. And that's a way to make it complex, or you can kind of just mash on the keyboard and get a mostly complex password. As long as it's 12 characters, that will be pretty secure, but it will be difficult to type. Another way to try and secure things is to use other languages. If you know phrases in other languages, whether it is a Latin one or of a different one, you're able to relatively secure that environment. You can also use your favorite foods or locations to just as a help you remember. That's a way to do it. But one thing I would say to be careful with is if you sit at your laptop, you're like, hey, I need a location. You look up, you have a picture of Paris. You're like, yeah, Paris is cool. And you have your picture of your family, Paris 2013. Please do not make your password Paris 2013 ! Because in that scenario, if someone is trying to be malicious, we can sit down, say, okay, what would make me think of a password, and actually deduce and do social engineering to bring it to that point. So just a word to the wise on that. Now, some people say, hey, don't write it down. And I say, do write it down. Have a password diary that you keep, but keep it in a lockbox or in a safe. When you have it in a lockbox or a safe, that means that it's protected and secured physically, right? Like we're not only just thinking about how we're securing something digitally, we're thinking about how to physically secure it as well. The other thing to do is to add it to your will, right? There's a lot of digital resources and assets that you may only have access to, but then if you do pass away, who will be able to restore those things? And that might be the bank accounts, that might be investment accounts, that might be even Netflix, which if you just cancel the card, you can get rid of Netflix, right? But to try and prevent additional things being charged to accounts like that, having that password diary added to the will is a way to protect you and those you love that will be taking care of it afterwards. The other thing we recommend is using a password manager. Now, there are a lot that are out there and available. The three that we have found to be the best, which once again, the best, gonna disclaimer that, clarify that, the ones that we found that we've enjoyed and found to have worked well for us in personal and in business applications is LastPass, 1Password, and if you have to, KeePass. And I'll explain that. LastPass and 1Pass are programs that can either sit on your desktop or in the web browser and help you autofill passwords as you go along. As long as you remember the master password, you can access all of your passwords altogether. And they will force you to log in every time you turn on the computer. That way, even if I did just pick it up, it is more secure than keeping everything in Edge or Chrome. That being said, it also has some really cool sharing features. So maybe you need to share the Netflix password. Please don't do that. They've said not to. If you need to share it, other resources with other people, it allows you those features and functionality. KeePass is a little bit different because it creates kind of like an Excel spreadsheet of your passwords in a physical file that lives on your computer. If that file is ever deleted, you no longer have access to it. If you ever forget the password, you've also lost access to it. But in some use cases, if you're leery of using cloud resources to save your passwords, it is a viable standard. Now, I did want to talk about backing up your data, right? Because data protection, data privacy, we also have to make sure that we back it up. Now, a lot of people will use like an external hard drive, something like this. They do have smaller ones to back up your photos, your pictures, even your KeePass or other things that may be sensitive into a singular device. Now, these are really cool and you can get a lot of storage. But if your storage needs are really growing fast, these do get expensive in the long run. The other thing is these are not very mobile. And if you ever drop these, they will break. And even just moving it around and shaking it like this can damage it. So they really are meant to just be stationary. You never touch it, you leave it alone. But they can be a way to effectively back up an entire computer or possibly a few computers. The other way is with a USB thumb drive. These are smaller and easy to lose. But once again, they can do it. The pros of it is sometimes it is faster than transferring data across the internet. And sometimes it's just easier to have something that you just plug in, back up, and only back up really what you need and call it good. The main issue is if they ever get damaged or lost in a fire or flood, water damage, or someone walks into your home, picks it up, walks away, it's gone. You may have it on the originating device, but you might not have it on that external device anymore. The other thing to keep in mind is a lot of these external devices have proprietary software, which will force you into their ecosystem, which you may or may not have bargained for. And that data is now actually really difficult to share outside of a household if you did want to share it. Maybe you have lots of kid pictures like I do, and you're saying, hey, grandma, grandpa, I want you to see this. Ooh, that's really tough. And that's where cloud-based storage does provide easier access for sharing it. And there are a lot of solutions like iCloud, OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox. There's more options than that. There's quite a few out there, but there's pros and cons to each of them. They typically are easy to sync, and you can log in from anywhere, which is really, really nice. And even with OneDrive, I believe if you have an Office 365 subscription, they'll give you 1 terabyte of storage, which in most cases is more than what you usually need for your personal needs, especially in terms of sharing. Now, if you're trying to run an entire movie database off of that, cloud storage is not really the right solution, and you would be looking at external devices. But for those photos, videos, or even just quick document sharing, OneDrive, G Drive, and iCloud are going to take care of those needs all the time. Some cons to keep in mind is they do read your data. G Drive does, which is Google Photos, will read everything and do facial recognition, which in some cases, if you're like, hey, I just want to see all the pictures of this one person in my phone, you can, which is really cool. But then you're also allowing Google to have all that personally identifiable information running through it. The other issue is if you ever lose your password, you lose access to that data. And sometimes you can recover the passwords, but sometimes it's a little bit difficult. And it's a pro and con to weigh. The more space you need, if you're going past that 1 terabyte limit for OneDrive, or sometimes Google can be a little bit weird of like, okay, we're going to compress some photos and not compress these other ones. You may need to pay for more. Just kind of hit or miss. It will get expensive in the long run. And so you may need to look at multiple solutions for your family dynamics or for your use cases. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is dead devices. Say you've had a laptop or a desktop for an extended period of time and it's just no longer booting or working, but there may be sensitive data left on that hard drive. The best thing to do is to pull the hard drive out and hit it with a hammer, which I know sounds silly, but what happens is in most hard drive cases, it is a spinning disk. And if you're able to damage that spinning disk, then that data is no longer readable. If it's what we call a solid state hard drive, which kind of mimics the thumb drive a little bit more, those are easier to break and to destroy. Now, if you're looking on an industrial level, they do have shredders for these, kind of like a wood chipper for hard drives, which are super cool, but also very expensive. A hammer or a drill press, those are actually great ways to destroy the data and make sure that if you ever donate your laptop, your data is not being picked up by somebody else. The other thing to keep in mind is scanners and copier machines. On a lot of the older ones, they actually do have a hard drive that keeps a saved scan of everything that has been run through that machine. So you do have to be aware that you do not want to always sell those to third parties or to just throw them away without ensuring that those hard drives are gone. That being said, if there were any questions, there are a few people around us at the library today. If anyone here has any questions or if there's any questions online, happy to answer anything. I'm okay sitting in silence for just a moment as well. Yes?
So with an external hard drive, how often should I back up my computer that I use for a mix of personal, slight work, and then a little bit of school since I am a student?
That's a wonderful question. So there's two use cases that are there. If your hard drive has, I would say, good proprietary software, it will do what we call a progressive backup, where as things are being changed, it will continually update the originating backup so that you never have to do a start run of a backup. In most use cases, you will have to hit a start backup, and I would say to do that on a weekly basis.
Didn't LastPass get in trouble here recently for like leaks?
So with LastPass, that is vaguely true. As with any organization that is holding people's passwords, they will try to be hacked. Every single one that's out there will have hacks and hack attempts. And LastPass has been a little bit more public with theirs, which is actually nice that they've been more open and transparent about their process. To this date, nothing has been actively leaked. And if there has been any data that is gone, it has been encrypted to just enormous levels. So has there been anything that is legitimately exploitable been taken? No. They just happen to be the more public ones.
You mentioned with destroying hard drives, but what if I'm wanting to sell my laptop or computer, but I don't want to, smash it with a hammer to make sure all the data is gone and thereby I can't sell it? Is a format just okay, or do I need to do something more special to make sure my data is gone?
That's a really good question. Windows will allow you to do a reset and in theory, delete everything off of the hard drive. And that will work, I would say, maybe 80 to 90% of the time. If you do have someone that is truly malicious, once they receive the new to them device, they can pull the hard drive out and then see if they can run recovery on the sections that have been formatted. Now, is that foolproof? Yes, no. It is going to be really hit or miss. It would be safer to pull the hard drive and put a new hard drive in and then run a reset. But I also understand that that's not always the best use case. But majority of the time, you are pretty safe to just run the reset. But just be aware that there is always going to be a slight chance.
Adam, do you want to mention dangers of password reuse?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's great. So password reuse is where you've used the same password for multiple accounts. And something to keep in mind is that T-Mobile, I believe Macy's, Target, and a slew of other big retailers have all been hacked in the last 3 years, which means your usernames, address, phone numbers, credit cards, and passwords have been taken. Now, typically when a hack like that occurs, they will take the passwords and then post them publicly on the internet. And then they'll say, okay, if you've been using this email address and this password, we're going to hit as many websites as possible with the same username and password or email address and password to see how many other websites or accounts this will unlock. So when you reuse a password in multiple locations, you're actually setting up multiple points of failure and really quite a bit of exposure to yourself for potential harm. And that's where a password manager will help you just have that 1 or 2 primary passwords to unlock your vault, but then be able to do randomly generated passwords for every single website. For me personally, I think I'm sitting at about 900 passwords in my vault currently. And that's just a way to help us keep and manage everything and make sure that it is all secure across the board.
How often should I be changing out my passwords?
That's a great question. How often should you change out your password? So there is some people who will say 30 days, others will say 90, others will say 120. 120 seems to be kind of the industry average. There may be people that say 90, but in most use cases that I've seen, it's 120. But I would say that if you're doing that at least for your vault, and if all your other passwords are 16 characters, randomly generated, you can allow that